Welcome back to Candy's Classic Game Shrine, everyone. Today on Tinker Time DIY, I want to show you guys how to make your own Zelda Game Boy diorama. Now for this project, there's a few things you're going to need. First of all, you're going to need a Game Boy shell. I highly recommend using the Chinese knockoff shells that you can find on AliExpress. Heck, even Amazon has them, instead of using real shells, because eventually they're going to become scarce, the real consoles, so let's keep as many real ones as we can out there. So when you get your kit, usually it comes in two pieces already apart like this. Mine comes with a little bit of screwdrivers. You have the tri-wing and the Phillips. You have your buttons, some screws, and the little cover for the link cable, as well as some of the membranes. You're not really going to need the membranes. Depending on the project, I keep the start and select buttons. It's entirely optional if you want to use them or not. I'm probably going to use them in this. So aside from the Game Boy shell, what else do you need? I almost forgot. This comes with your Game Boy shell, so that just sticks right on. Other than that, for this particular project, you're going to need some shrubs. I got these at the craft store like Michael's. You can get them right there. These used to have a longer base, but I snipped them off. That way it was easier to glue them. Next up, you're going to want some trees. I try to go for assorted shapes and colors just to make it look a little bit more natural, I guess. Some of them will have bases, some of them will have little sticks, some of them have removable bases with pegs. It's entirely up to you and which ones you get. So aside from those, you are going to need some moss. Here's a small little sample of what we're probably going to use. I also like to keep a bit of ground up moss as like leaf litter and fake grass for these types of projects. If you want, this is the bag I have. It's an assorted bag of different types of mosses, and you get some wood chips in there and some sticks. Also, you're going to need some, you're going to have to excuse my cat, and you are going to need some of this gravel sand. Aside from that, you're going to need some crazy glue or super glue, and a hot glue gun, and glue sticks. I also recommend a pair of tweezers for more precision placing on some of your things. Also makes it a little less likely to get crazy glue on your fingers. For your project, you're also going to need, obviously, your centerpiece. And your centerpiece in this case is a little gashapon figure of the Master Sword. You can pick these up on eBay or Amazon, or if you're lucky, a gashapon machine. The last part is optional, but you can add these resin tree stumps, and it adds a really nice effect. Otherwise, you can use another piece of wood or a little rock, and it'll work just fine. Now, if you're not using the select buttons, I love using these little craft hedges, and they fit perfectly inside of the start and select buttons. All right, let's begin. First off, you're going to want to take the shell apart. This is already taken apart. You don't really need to do anything. In most shells, this will be fastened down by 4 screws. They'll be Phillips screws, and you're just going to take that and discard it. We're not going to need that anymore. Next up, flip it over, remove the battery cover, and remove these springs. If they're giving you trouble, take a screwdriver, push down on that, and then push up. And it comes, well, it should come right out. There we go. There we are. And then just do the same for the remaining 2. And you can put those to the side. They're great to keep in case your original Game Boy contacts for the batteries get corroded or wear out. You can place the battery pack, not the battery pack, you can place the battery cover back on, and then you can work with this half. Now we're going to place the screen on. Since this is going to be covered up, I'm not really too concerned about fingerprints and all that nonsense. So just slap that on there, press it down, Also, don't mind my dog snoring in the background. And don't forget there is a protective layer on the outside of these lenses as well. And you just want to peel that off. Perfect. Next up, you're going to want to stick the buttons into your Game Boy shell. How I do this, I usually have the buttons laying over the open part of the back of the Game Boy so that the buttons can fully go through and not pop out. You're going to take your super glue and you are just going to apply it rather generously to the rim around the button. Now try to avoid getting this on your fingers. If you want to know what happens, stay tuned. I'll probably glue my fingers together at some point during this video. Okay. Press that down, try and center it as best as you can, and just let that set. We're going to repeat the process for the A and B buttons. They're a little bit more tricky because there's not much room for them to grab. So basically what I will do is put a spot of glue here, 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 and here. And then once all the glue is dry, I'm going to go over it with a hot glue gun and fill in the gaps to make sure it's really secure. Once you have your hot glue gun heated up, you're just going to fill around the spaces. Now, it may not look pretty, but that's okay. This is the inside of the Game Boy shell. Doesn't matter. This is what it needs to look like. Now for the select buttons, or well, start and select technically. For these buttons, you're going to use a little bit of the crazy glue, and again, we're going to reinforce it with a tiny bit of the hot glue. We're going to do the same method by applying the super glue to the excess rim on the bottom. That's a look from the front, and here's the back. So, time to let our hot glue gun warm up again, and let's glue this in place. And again, doesn't have to be pretty in here, just needs to be structurally sound. More, oops, accidentally glued some screws onto my glue gun. One thing I can't stand about glue guns is how stringy it gets once it starts to cool down. And there we go. We just got to close this up and we will begin decorating. Before we proceed, I just want to mention this. The power switch you can completely leave out, but I like leaving it because it's, I don't know, it's something interactive that you can flick around with on the Game Boy. So this part, you don't have to actually copy me. And there we have it. Now it's time to start decorating. Now, people ask me, how do I come up with how I place things on my dioramas? And honestly, it's completely trial and error. I just move things around until I like how it looks, and then I glue it down. For instance, I start with the main features first, such as the trees and the ground. So basically, I'll take my diorama trees and place them around in different ways that look appealing to me. This one's actually not too bad. Even if I were to move it here, maybe orient the tree a little bit more to give more of an opening. So it'll roughly look like this when I glue everything down. So when I'm ready, I'll take my super glue, because honestly at this point it's mostly going to be super glue that we use. So you're going to take that and apply a little bit to the bases of the trees and place them where you want. And here we are. This is the beginning stages of our forest. Next up, you're going to want to take your master sword. We're going to place this in the center. Let that dry, but there it is. Don't worry about any excess crazy glue that pops out during your crafting. It'll all be covered by your moss and your gravel. This is how it's starting to look now. On my completed one, we'll move out to the side for a second. You'll see I have a bush and a little tree log here. We're going to try and essentially do the same thing. So for this one, I think we'll go with maybe this nice cherry blossom style shrub. And we are going to take a little bit of this glue. Now we're just going to let this dry a little bit and cure. Now it's time to do the ground on our project. What we're going to want to do at this point is start with our gravel. Now to make it look like realistic ground around the master sword, take your crazy glue and make a, I guess like a forest opening with your tip of the crazy glue and just paint a thin layer of glue there. Doesn't need to be in perfect circle, doesn't need to be any uniform shape really. You can kind of see there. Basically, this is the messy part. I recommend doing this over a piece of paper or something you can easily get the rest of the gravel back from. And just sprinkle it on, just like you would salt. A little bit goes a long way here. Just tap it around to make sure it's all made contact with the crazy glue. And just let it fall off like that. And you should be left with something like this. Next up, it's time to do the forest floor, like the leaf litter and the grass. You're gonna do the same thing you did with the crazy glue and just spread it across the ground. And then except the gravel, we're going to use some of the moss here. Now before you go and use it, you can go and shred it up and mush it up even more. You can use a coffee grinder to make it even more fine, but I found that just rubbing it between your fingers works just fine. And you can pick the larger parts out and let the more finer pieces fall through. I'll show you my technique of spreading it when I'm done. Any larger pieces you may want to remove so they go on your piece a little bit easier. And don't worry, you don't have to do this all in one shot. So just take your time and spread that crazy glue. Now to quote Bob Ross, remember guys, when you put these things together, there's no such thing as, well, there are accidents, but they're only happy accidents. And we got our little happy trees here and our little happy forest. You beat the devil out of that glue. And here you have it, guys. There's some final touch-ups that you can do. You can always add more moss and grass, but this is essentially how you create the ground. And now you just add any final touches that you want to add. Instead of using the tree stump, I'm going to use a little log here with some moss. I'm going to use some hot glue to fasten that. And any exposed glue you can cover with moss to make it look more natural. Now I like to add little accents to the holes on the side since there's no motherboard in there to fill these holes. This is where the hot glue comes in, and quite well. So carefully put that on its side and just fill the holes. That's what he said. When you've put a little bit of like a hot glue screen, I guess you can call it, over the thing, you can take some of your moss, just take random globs of it, and just put it in the holes. Just let it do its thing naturally, organically, or however you want to call it. So you've essentially covered up all the holes here. It's up to you. You can put some moss in the grates of the speaker, and I also like to put some moss here so nothing can really go in it. And there you have it, guys. This is your own custom Game Boy diorama. The best part is, I like using them for little compartments to hold tiny little things like rings, notes, and little doodads. But here it is. This is the completed one. Well, that's how you make your own custom Game Boy diorama. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys thought of the video and the project idea in the comments below. And until next time, guys, take care. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters, Barclay Crazy, Chipper Angeles Negrete, Joyful Sworn, Michael Carter, and the SideQuest Gamer. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you'd like to become a Patreon supporter of mine, the link is in the description below.